Hey, thank you so much for joining us online today. You have picked a great time to check out His Table Church. We have this morning a special session on godly marriage. We have with us today Shara and Tracy Gilreath. These are licensed marriage counselors. They've been in the business for 13 years. They have seen a lot. On top of that, they've been married 31 years. So they have a wealth of knowledge to share with us. Feel free to like, comment. Make sure you leave any comments. Send us a message if you have any questions for us. We'd love to see you in person sometime. You can join us in worship at the Salisbury YMCA every Sunday at 10:30 a.m. May this be a blessing to you and your husband or wife and your family. God bless you.
Amen.
All right. So I'm going to get out of the way now and turn it over to these guys. Tracy, Shara, thank you so much for being here. And what do y'all have for us today?
So thank you for...
Number 5 is what I'm showing there, Cody.
Thank you for having us back. We really enjoyed last week and looking forward to today. I do want to just kind of blend in what Pastor Brad was saying, especially as men. Men are very, the majority of men are mostly task-oriented, or if you think about shopping, we are, let's go and achieve it, let's get it out, and take it home. And, obviously, I wouldn't say that all women, but the majority of women are, let's just browse and look through and, the shopping kind of thing. And so when I say that task-oriented, I'm just thinking about what he said is like, there is great reward for a man to engage with his wife. It's not about checking a box, but whenever you connect with them, whenever you engage with them, there is a response that you're going to get that is a great reward. And I'm not just talking about sex, I'm obviously talking about connection and that blending of that becoming one with your wife. And so I just wanted to kind of acknowledge that and say, yes, amen. As a man, there is a great reward in that.
And I think to add to that a little bit from a female perspective, I think one thing that if you talk about a man becoming a leader in his home, I think women, we need to also work to make sure they succeed at that. And not cut them off at their knees, make them feel less than what God has made them to be. And I think that's important because I did come to a place in the middle of our struggles and our trials where God got a hold of me. And I want to be clear, because part about what we've even been singing about this morning, I hear a lot about God bringing beauty of ashes, being a restorer, right? We've been singing about that this morning, about a great God. There is nothing about what we're talking about here today that I believe we can do exponentially successfully without God.
Amen.
He has got to be the restorer. He has got to be the one who does bringing the beauty from the ashes. And I know that God had to help me see that I'm not the restorer. And sometimes I, as a female, would think that I knew exactly what we needed to do and how to do it. And God had to help me understand that there are more ways to get this done and to heal this than actually, and to be honest with you, I had to humble myself. So I remember specifically one time when I was praying and God really spoke to me in one of his very ways that only I understand him to speak to me. But he did tell me specifically, Shara, you are asking him to make a lot of changes. You are asking him to say, I'm sorry for a lot of things. He said, but sweetheart, there's some stuff you need to say you're sorry for too. And I knew exactly what he was talking about. So I had to, one night, sorry to make this so heavy all of a sudden, but I think the Lord's been dealing with me already this morning. But I had to sit him down and just tell him. I said, there's some things I need to say to you, and I just need you to listen. I said, I'm sorry for every time I have made you feel less than the man that God has made you to be. I'm sorry for every eye roll. Come on, women, we know.
I'm not saying anything. Every
eye roll that you have seen and heard. again, that has disrespected you as a man and as, again, my partner, for every sigh, deep sigh. My husband says you can sometimes hear my sighs all the way to Texas, you know. But I apologize for not being, or for making you feel less. So I want to say that I think this goes hand in hand. You know, it's one thing to ask, you know, or men to step up and be the leader of the home, but then women, we have to examine ourselves, and we have to say or ask ourselves, is there anything that we are doing that's making that difficult on them? How can I help them succeed in this? Because obviously that's what you want, or you wouldn't be saying the things you're saying or doing the things you're doing. You want him to succeed. So, sweetheart, how can I help you succeed? Because that is the goal. And when he succeeds, we all succeed. And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. There's a scripture, Psalm 16:11. David is talking about the Lord, and we want to kind of use this scripture today. It says, in your presence is fullness of joy. When your face lights up because you are so happy to be with me, you fill me with joy.
That's Psalm 16:11.
16:11.
Can we throw that up there?
In your presence is fullness of joy.
And there's I'm not sure if this is the Message, or I know it's not King James, but it says, when your face lights up because you're so happy to be with me, you fill me with joy. And it, I think, what is that, New King James? Or, yeah. In your right hand there's pleasures forevermore.
Yeah, I've got my glasses on.
Sorry.
But really and truthfully, I think God has intended marriage to be something that's joyful. And that's not the message we get from what we're seeing around us or what we're seeing on TV. The message we typically get is, okay, we're just waiting to die here. we're surviving it, and we're just waiting until death comes to claim us. No joy at all. But that's not how God intended it to be.
No, I'm reminded of, I don't know if you ever watched Everybody Loves Raymond or not, but it's a great show that talks about, a family that's next door to each other, and that's kind of his Ray's dad is like, when there's conflict, no big deal because we're just waiting for death, and we don't want to, that's not what God has intended for us. God has intended us to have joy and to connect with one another and enjoy one another. And even as a 55-year-old male who's been married for 31 years, I'm not looking to just exist and have her be my roommate for the rest of my life. I want to experience that joy with her.
Life abundantly, right?
That's right.
So part of abundant life is a joy-filled marriage. That's a part of it.
The problem is that conflict something gets in the way. The things that we disagree with or things that we struggle with. There's a great book called Enemy Mode, and so often we treat our spouses as they're our enemy when they're not our enemy. They're our friend, they're our lover, they're our spouse. They're there for us, and we have to go into that relational mode and remind myself that you're not my enemy, even though it may feel that way at the time. Like, I know that as a man I get defensive, and that probably has a lot to do with my past and how I was brought up. Immediately I go to that defense mode, but I have to constantly remind myself she's not my enemy. She is for me. I am for her. And so when you get out of that enemy mode and you go into that relational mode, you want to speak to that about the switch?
Yeah, sometimes with my couples, I'll say, pretend there's a switch on the back of your neck. And when that switch is in the on position, then that means you're in relational mode. And relational mode is, I see you. I hear you, I see what's going on with you. I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but when someone actually says something to you that speaks to where you are in the moment, it feels so good because it's like, oh, somebody sees me. And so when we're in relational mode, I see you. I see what's happening to you. So when it's in the off position, we call that problem mode. I just see the problem. And this is a problem, and you're a problem, and you're my enemy because you do this and you do that, and it's the problem. And so we've got to learn how to live in relational mode instead of problem mode. Now that's tough, I think, probably for some of you guys and women who work, right? You may do jobs where you're problem solving all day long. You know, you're doing those problem things. But I think when we come home, it's important we do a check. How many of you just sit in the car, deep breath, I'm going in, I'm now dad or I'm now mom. So it's important to go, am I in relational mode right now or am I in problem mode? So when I walk through this door, what am I going to be looking for? What am I going to be? I'm going to be looking for him. I'm going to be looking for where he's at. I'm going to be feeling and sensing what's going on in his world, and he's going to be doing the same for me. I don't know if I'm saying that clearly or that makes sense.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you mentioned that because you use the analogy of the switch on the back of your neck, and sometimes I feel like maybe it's just my house, but I feel like you know how your kids play with the light switches. Somebody's playing with my switch sometimes. You know, anybody else? Like, I mean, what's causing that? Why? Who's playing with my switch? What's leading me to treat my wife or her to treat me like I'm the problem instead of seeing me? I mean, what's contributing?
I think a lot of times it's fear. A lot of times it's our past experiences that cause us to, tread on or, walking on eggshells kind of situation. You're treading on water and you're afraid that something, if I'm presenting this problem, all of a sudden something's going to happen and I'm going to become the problem versus this being the problem outside of me. I remember, I don't know if you want to speak to the meat or not, but just a little bit about our story. So we're living right now, we're building a house and we're living in a camper, and we've got some of our, we kind of bought half a cow, how you do that, and you put it in a freezer, and anyway, so we're having it stored in someone's basement, and apparently the switch got cut off. Our freezer was plugged up. So we lost all that meat. Yeah, half a cow.
Not a whole.
Not a whole cow.
Half a cow.
Yeah.
A lot of it.
So I'm walking in to the camper, and I'm thinking that as I'm walking in, oh my gosh, how am I gonna tell Shara this? So fear is overtaking me. And you want to describe how you responded?
Well, I mean, if your spouse comes in, they got something to say, and you just go, uh-oh. Like, oh dear, like this is going to be bad, right? This is not good. And so he had that. I could just tell. He was like, I got something to tell you. I don't know how to tell you this. So I have two decisions then as his wife to go, okay, am I going to pay attention more to what's going to come out of his mouth, or am I going to pay attention to the fact that my husband is struggling right now to tell me what he's about to tell me? I got two ways of looking at that. And so in that moment, and maybe it's just because of just all that we've been through and things that we've practiced, and knowing me, I'm like, what's wrong, But I could just tell he was struggling, and I said, so what's up? And so he said, well, all that meat we had in the freezer. He says, Shara, I don't know what happened. I don't know. He says, but electricity went off and it's all ruined. Of course, immediately, I do think about the fact, oh my goodness, all that meat is gone. But I could see the look on his face. And I felt so bad for him because he was feeling really, really bad and scared about telling me. I think he thought I was going to just go, well, why didn't you this or why didn't you that? And instead, I took a step back and I said, it's okay. And then I put my arms around his neck and I hugged him. I said, we're all right.
And let me tell you what I'm not afraid of. I'm not afraid of her. I'm afraid of the disconnect. I don't like the disconnect because that reminds me of my past, the disconnect. Like I said, a lot of us are product of our experiences. And a lot of us have those buttons inside of us, those like hot buttons, those things that make you feel, as soon as someone pushes it, you immediately go to that, whatever that mode is. That's a hot button for me. I want to stay connected to my wife.
How are you doing that? How are you maintaining that connection?
Well, do some of the things we talked about last week, right? We are scheduling regular times together to talk. We are...
Just like you mentioned last week about the morning coffees and spending the first half hour.
Spending time together, and it is getting to know one another. So much so, guys, I mean, you're creating this connection with your spouse. And we're going to talk a little bit about conflict, because I think conflict is what's getting in the way of this. But you are working towards creating such a connection with your spouse that you are completely aware, like there's just no question in your mind when that disconnect happens. Sometimes...
Changing the atmosphere.
We say that all the time. He walks into our camper now, and there's a change in the atmosphere.
They're building a house, they're living in a camper.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a change. Something's not right. Something about this isn't normal. What's up? You know, and so sometimes it is just as simple as it's been a bad day and I'm tired, you know, or it's going a week and we haven't even talked, and we look at one another and it's like, I miss you. I miss talking with you. I miss seeing your face. I miss hearing your voice. I miss all of that. And if we weren't working consistently at building that, we wouldn't become aware of it.
And I think early on in our relationship, we weren't aware of that because we weren't making a connection. We were existing, we were having kids, we were going through life, and we weren't attending to this. Yeah. We were attending to everything else but this. And that's where we got lost. That's where our relationship got lost, because we were attending, everything else was the priority as opposed to this being the priority.
I see that in my marriage. I'm just kind of keep everybody in my bag. Is that cool? Yeah. And I really maybe just like maybe some input from the ladies. I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like with my wife, Katie, time alone with me is therapeutic, is refreshing for her. Like I know that whenever I'm seeing her stressed, we gotta go to dinner, just us. We've got to get away. Like we go stay a weekend somewhere and it's like therapy right there. Ladies, is she alone there? Is that something you guys are seeing, you ladies are seeing? Nobody's responding. Can I get a show of hands?
There you go, hands, there you go.
Men, maybe I'm wrong. I feel like my wife almost needs that more than me, but maybe I need to look within myself and say, maybe I need that time with her too, and I'm not even realizing it. I'm maybe more than work being tough, maybe more than the kids being tough, maybe I need to focus on that too. Do you see that in your sessions, that maybe women are more vocal about it and men maybe don't realize we need it as much? Or?
Well, I think women, and I think we are more intuitive by nature. I think that's kind of how God's created our brains. We are more typically, not always, more relational in that regard. But that's not always been the case with women. But I think one of the things that you mentioned, like spending time, so I didn't see all the women's hands go up. I think that also speaks to our love languages. So that is one part of what we do with our couples. And if you haven't taken the love language quiz, it is found online. I'd highly recommend everybody take that quiz, both of you, to know which one of those, I think it's 5 or 6 things that's, 5, that is five love languages.
Yeah, quality time. Just think about this, what really makes you feel important, makes you feel valuable. So there's quality time, acts of service, somebody doing something for you, words of affirmation, somebody praising you or saying thank you or those kind of things, gifts, and then physical touch. Yeah. So those 5 usually are things that make you feel important, special, valuable.
I always say spending time with your spouse is important regardless if it's their love language or not.
Right.
You need to be talking to them, you need to be spending time with them, but you also need to be attending to the things. So you could be guys doing laundry and vacuuming and doing those things thinking, I don't understand why she's not happy with me. Well, it could be that that's just not her love language. Acts of service isn't what does it for her. She says, well, you should be doing all those things, right? But if you would spend time with me, if you would set aside time specifically for me, That is what makes me feel loved. Or if you would come into the kitchen and hug me, or come and help me cook in the kitchen, or whatever that is, that's what tells me that you love me.
So maybe it's your love language that, like maybe quality time is not your love language, but it is your wife's. Mm-hmm. And what would be therapeutic for you maybe is you're spending quality time, but she says, gosh, you're doing such a good job. I thank you so much for taking care of our family or whatever.
That's already making me feel
You're such a good guy. Yeah.
Tracy's words of affirmation and physical touch, those are his two top. And so, and I'm just going to tell you the ones that your spouse needs are the ones you're not good at. That's usually how it goes.
Why is that?
I don't know why, but that's just how it happens. But I did not grow up in a home where we affirmed one another. That is not how I grew up. Words meant nothing to me. Now the times that stand out in my mind, the happy times, were the times when we put down work and we went out and played in the backyard, picnicked in the evenings. So quality time is one of my top. Now, he needs words of affirmation. So I've had to ask him, okay, well, what does that even mean? What's that even look like?
And words of affirmation is not necessarily her saying good job, but like if I did something like worked on a project or I built a deck, at our old house, and her coming out and going, wow, this looks great. Those things are like, speak to me, because it's like inside and I feel like Superman or whatever. I did a good job.
And it's not like one gender is more prone to different ones.
No, it's not.
Yeah. I noticed last night, actually, it's kind of funny we're talking about this, but my youngest, Camden, we were cleaning up and trying to get the house straight and all this stuff. And if y'all know Camden, she is spicy. I mean, she is spicy. She is feisty, the youngest, and I mean, you better watch yourself in your sleep. We were cleaning it, and I made the point. She's only 5, and I said, Camden, we're all going to sleep in the living room tonight and just camp out in here. Will you get the mats and make the pallets and all this stuff? And I said, you're really good at doing that. You're really good at making the beds. And she came to me like 10 minutes later and was like, Dad, thank you for saying I was good at that. And yeah, I immediately realized okay, that meant something to her. So maybe I just early on touched on her love language of
Absolutely.
telling her she was good at something.
Your kids have love languages too.
Absolutely.
And there are ways to figure that out as well. That's, to me, that's huge. Like step number 1, we need to figure that out. What is that?
I feel like our relationship has got a lot better right there.
It's a good feeling. Yeah.
So kind of transitioning to, so what gets in the way? So we all obviously are talking about what we want, but what gets in the way of us having that kind of relationship, that connected relationship? And it's conflict. It's looking at a problem and she becoming my problem as opposed to the problem being my problem. I switch out of that relational mode and into problem mode, and she becomes the problem for me, and she's my enemy. And we've got to figure this out because I want to restore the connection. And I think we talked about a little bit last week about sharks and turtles. Turtles like to withdraw. They don't like conflict. Sharks like to just let's deal with it and solve the problem. In turtle mode, she's going to withdraw whenever emotions are high, and emotions are you deal with the problem whether emotions are high or not. You don't care. You just want to solve the problem. Well, if I in conflict am in this emotional high, she's going to pull away. She's going to pull away from me. So I have to create this environment that feels safe for her. So what feels safe for her, and again, this is where we've talked, and that's what I would encourage you guys to do. Please don't just assume this is what your spouse needs. Please talk about it, of what do you need from me? And we say that all the time to our couples is, okay, so whenever you're having those problems, ask your spouse what they need. What do you need for me to engage with you? What do you need for us to kind of have this problem solved or resolve this? And for her, it's safety. It's pulling down the emotions and dealing with, I don't want to say completely logical, but emotions are low, logic is high. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. So this also goes back to how you were raised, how you did conflict growing up. There was a lot of fighting and arguing, and I'm sorry, Mama, if you listen to this after the fact, but there was a lot of arguing going on, so there was high levels of energy, or things just didn't feel good, you know, it didn't feel safe. I typically would go to my bedroom when things like that were going on, or I would find a way to hide. So think about conflict in your home and what you did. And what was going on and when you were growing up, and more than likely that's what you're bringing to the table in conflict in your marriage. And so when he would come at me with all this energy that he's got, and you know, he's upset and I'm mad and I'm blah, you know, that kind of thing, and then I'm just, you know, doing this number and I don't want to talk about it. Honestly, I would shut down. I would completely shut down and get quiet. I would refuse to engage in conversation with him. I could go days and not even talk to him because of the way he made me feel. He felt unsafe. Because I saw that as mean. You're being mean, and I can't talk to mean. You know, I'm just not going to do that. And so we had to kind of go, okay, what's going on here? So our counselor obviously helped us figure that out.
And by the way, mean is not necessarily yelling and cursing and screaming. Yeah. That's not where mean comes into play. At least in our book, it wasn't that mean, you know, cursing or yelling at her. It was more the dramatization. Sheriff always said I could be a Golden Globe winner, you know, as far as my how drama, you know, I pull in. Hannah's like, yeah. I can get with the best of them.
I think that's why you're such a good girl, Dad.
That's right.
No, but we had to figure out, he says, okay, so if that's not, obviously for him, it was, but I have to work this out. We have got to fix this. And so what do we need to do? What do you need from me? Well, first of all, I need all that
to go away.
Come down. About, 10 levels here, all right? Let's bring this down. And then it's the way you say it to me. Mm-hmm. It's the way you approach me.
Right.
So I think we alluded to this in our last week, when the way we say things sometimes, it's like slamming somebody up against the wall. Well, when you do this or when you do that, and when you always and never say those words, always and never, take those out of your vocabulary. Because I would go, always, really, Tracy, always? And he would go, well, not always.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. A lot of the time. So it's helped. It says, Cheryl, what do you need? What do you need from me to be able to do that? We'll say it in this way so it invites me into the conversation.
Right.
So Cheryl, when this happened earlier today, it bothered me, and I got hurt, or I was hurt by that. Okay, if you approach me like that, I'm still going to be a little bit like this, but I'm more apt to go, okay. He says, can we talk about that?
Let me say one other thing. So we've been doing this long enough now that I notice when the turtle is retreating. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times I'll pause her and say, and men or women, I would use this. When you see the turtle going away, so time out, wait a minute. What did you hear me say? And I've said that a lot to her. When I'm noticing the turtle going away, I'll say, wait a minute, Shara. What did you just hear me say? And it helps me to know her perspective.
So think about criticism. Maybe criticism is hard for you, and it was for me because I grew up with a critical parent. So whenever he's bringing something at me, a situation that he's upset with me, my tendency is to always hear that through a critical ear. And you're criticizing me. And that's really not what he's doing. What he's trying to convey to me is what he's feeling and how that made him feel. He's not trying to attack me, but because of my own stuff, and I have to know my stuff, right? I'm hearing, oh, you're criticizing me. And so it was really important for me to learn from him, Shara, I'm not trying to be critical. I need you to hear what I'm feeling. I need you to hear what's going on.
So transitioning to what's happening inside of you is going to be really important. Like I know a lot of times what's happening inside of her. I mean, I don't know specifically, but I know whenever she retreats, there's not a safety area, or the atmosphere is not safe. But noticing what happens inside of you, that's really important, because that's where you're noticing I call it the volcano. Volcanoes, explode because of pressure, not heat. Heat is constant. It's always whatever temperature is going to be down there. But the pressure builds until eventually the pressure's got nowhere to go and it explodes, unless they have, lava flowing out, like in Hawaii, they got lava constantly flowing out. But something is happening inside of you where you've got this emotional container, and if you had a stressful day, or something happened at work, or something's happened with your kids, and you're at that 8 or 9, it didn't take anything to get over that 10, and you're exploding with whoever's there in the room, or whoever's around you. And a lot of times it's going to happen with your spouse, because usually they're there. But noticing what happens inside of you.
Yeah, I think that is just as critical as figuring out even what's happening with your spouse is what's going on with me. So when you talk about how do I stay connected, part of that is I have to pay attention to me.
And sometimes we've got to call time out. There's a lot of times we call, wait a minute, I'm getting upset, time out. Can we back away from this just for a second? And let me gather myself. Let me gather my emotions and stuff.
There are several ways in which we communicate. And so I think you got to figure out maybe which one you are. One of them is you're a passive person. I've been a passive person. I'm a passive person in recovery. If you are passive, they call that goat cowering. It's kind of that, the message behind that is I don't matter. You matter more than me. So whatever you want. It's okay, yeah, sure. Whatever you want to do, that's fine. Because I don't matter. And everything inside me doesn't matter, or at least that's what, I would never say that out loud, but that's just how I lived. And so it's understanding and coming to a place of realizing that everything about me matters, 100%. And so when I'm passive, guess what I do? I avoid. So if there's a problem, I'm not going to talk about it. Yeah. If there's an issue, I'm not going to go there. I'm just going to run, tuck, tail, and hide. So it's knowing who you are and how you communicate, and I'm passive. And
the other pendulum shifts to the T-Rex. T-Rex is I matter, you don't. That's usually a very aggressive communicator. That's going to be unhealthy every time. That's more of a narcissist person, where they're you don't matter, I'm the loudest in the room.
No real intimacy.
There's no real intimacy, no real connection. I'm more the passive-aggressive communicator. They call this the chocolate-covered dragon. It's where you matter, but not really. And that's where I became, I would say, manipulative. I mean, more of that, even though I know you matter and I matter a little bit more than you. And I know that's unhealthy, obviously, but that's just where I was at. And then there's the assertive communicator.
Assertive communication is what we want to get to, which is you're both equal.
Yeah, we both matter.
Everything about me matters, everything about you matters. I'm just as powerful as you are. We're on the same playing field here. And so therefore, I'm going to treat you and respond to you in such a way that makes you understand you matter. And you're going to do the same for me. And I'm not going to treat you any other differently than that.
So we're taking this book from A Joy-Filled Marriage, and if you want to pick up that book, it's a great book.
4 Habits of a Joy-Filled Marriage.
Yeah. So he talks about, so what if you are a assertive communicator, you're a more healthy communicator, and your spouse is passive, what do you do with that? So you ask your spouse, what are you going to do about it? You do matter. I do value you. What are you going to do about it? What if you're the assertive, but you have the aggressor? And we deal with that a lot in counseling sessions, where either one spouse or the other is more narcissistic, more aggressive, and we encourage the other spouse to, I will only talk to you when you decide to be respectful. Be respectful of me, value me, so we both can resolve the conflict and reconnect.
There's a great book out there, Boundaries in Marriage. You need to get that because it talks about that. Boundaries in marriage. Yes, there are boundaries in marriage. And then passive aggressive, if you have a passive aggressive person, they're not really just coming right out and saying it. So you can say, we'll talk later when you are ready to deal with what's really going on with you. And so it's in other words, it's taking the stance. If I matter 100% of the time, then I'm not going to allow what you're bringing to the table to cause me to spin out of control. The only thing that I am in control of is me, my feelings, my emotions, my needs, my wants. I can't control him. I can only control you. So it's a mindset of, I want to communicate with you, but I can't do it in this way. And furthermore, it's going to hurt you and it's going to hurt me. So when you're ready to talk to me in a different way or in a way that we can actually deal with this, please come see me or tell me when you want to talk about this.
So let's kind of go into, so practically, what do you do? You know, whenever you are in conflict and you are having a difficult time with one another, there is a problem, you're still in relational mode. Relational mode tells you that agreement, let me make sure I'm communicating that right and you hear me right. Agreement is not the goal. Agreement is not the goal. Understanding is the goal. I want to understand what's going on inside of her. She wants to understand what's going on inside of me. We don't have to agree to resolve the conflict. Matter of fact, there's been times in our past, and I could probably name them off, where we had to agree to disagree. It was like, okay, that's your perspective. We're going to have to leave this. We're going to have to table this because I don't agree with you. You don't agree with me. And it obviously wasn't something that it was right or wrong, or it changed the direction of our marriage or our relationship. But it was something that was kind of outside of us. But we had to agree to disagree. And that was one subject we just weren't going to talk about anymore.
And it wasn't a competition.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a competition. I know you guys are getting ready to do a scavenger hunt, but hopefully it's just competition between the couples, not within the couple.
Right. We have cards back there. If you like, for this But yeah, so that'll be a connecting moment for you guys.
I think it's
That's right.
It's realizing that there's nothing more important than this, the connection. There is nothing more important than making sure we are staying in love, we are staying connected, or that I am communicating to you that I am for you. There isn't any problem that we can't get over, but this has got to be the goal here. And that's exemplified in the example that we gave earlier about the spoiled meat. I had a decision. I can either make it about that or I can make it about the connection. That meat was not as important as making sure that he felt loved, and he knew that didn't mean to me nearly as much as it did, as he means to me. I needed to make sure that I communicated to him that you mattered more to me than anything.
Let me give you an illustration of that. So I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but just one of those things. So we had an argument probably for 10 years. Early on, before we got married, Shara was choosing the plates, Chinaware, how you choose, before you get married and that kind of stuff. And Shara chose these plates that were square.
At the time, they were beautiful.
Square. Square plates. So I had grown up all my life, and I had never seen anything but round plates. So for 10 years, we had this same argument. No matter if it was started out as something we disagreed about, it always ended up back to their plates. It's all about those stupid plates. And we had that argument for 10 years, literally, no lie, until we got in counseling. And realized it was never about the plates. There's a great video, by the way, if you look it up on YouTube. It's not about the nail. There's this girl that has a nail in her head, and she's talking about the headache she has, and he's trying to go, yeah, but you got this nail in you're not hearing me. I got this real bad headache, and yeah, but you got this nail. You're not, listen to me. I got this headache. Yeah, but you get, anyway, it's not about that. It's so funny. It's hilarious. But that's what the plates was kind of for us. It was never really about the plates. It was about understanding where she's coming from. She's trying to create this wonderful place setting that's unique and, and pretty and everything. And I'm like, yeah, but they're square. So until we understood one another, it was never about the plates. It was about understanding where she was at.
Well, it was really, we talked about that this morning even. I don't know, we didn't fight about it, but we talked about it.
Yeah, we were talking about, we wanted to bring that illustration up.
Yeah. Because
I know, right?
he felt dismissed. He felt completely dismissed. Like I would tell him, I don't understand what your problem is. These are just plates. And I'm the female, and da-da-da-da. And then so I was just completely disregarding everything he had to say. And I wasn't listening to him. I wasn't understanding him. And if I had just taken 5-10 minutes and just listened, understood why this was so important to him, or why he didn't like these plates, or what the whole thing was about even now. He probably knows more details about it than I do. If I'd have just taken that time, we would have resolved it, and I would have go, okay, well, if that's what you're thinking, and if it's called empathy, guys. So empathy is something that you need to be building and building and building in your relationship. And if you don't know what empathy is the act of inserting myself as much as I can into your shoes and going, okay, if this is the way you're looking at it, if this is how you're understanding it, and this is the information you're using to arrive to this place, okay, then I understand it. I get why you feel the way you feel.
And whenever I began to understand her perspective, I began to value her perspective. She wanted it to be unique. She wanted it to be special. She wanted it to be different than any other thing. And even though it was odd for this old skull dipping redneck, I don't dip skull anymore, but I used to. I began to value that. I began to see that perspective and go, you're right. That is pretty unique compared to what I've been used to.
You can have the plates now.
You can have the plate. I don't know. They're going to be our kids' plates now. I know, right?
Anna goes, no. If you saw these plates, they are so 80s. It's not even funny.
I really want to see them.
I know, right? We got to bring them.
I'm going to bring a picture of them.
But again, it goes back to that whole valuing each other. It's not about the problem. It's about me valuing her, me responding to her and understanding her, and vice versa. Any questions?
Do you have questions?
Yeah. Y'all have any more?
We can, I'm sure the questions will come from all of this, so
Well,
we'll.
let me ask a question here, right? I mean, I think this is kind of getting on the same thing with the plates. Someone just said online here. What do you do about repeat offenders, they say? Example, they gave here is there's a problem within a relationship, within the house, whatever. You communicate with your spouse, they do better for a while, and then we're back where we started. Just over and over and over again dealing with the same issues. And they got here for a long period of time and dealing with these same issues. How do we address that?
Well, first, I think there needs to be a heart of forgiveness. I believe that's where you start at foundationally, is that there's no judgment. I'm not here to shame her. She's not here to shame me. If there is repeat offending, is it coming from a place of shame? Do they need outside help? Is there something that I'm contributing to that, whether I'm demeaning them whenever that happens, and that can create a cycle of shame. So it could be that, like I said, it could be the need for outside help to talk about that.
Or it's the way in which you're approaching it, the subject, and how, maybe they think, oh, well, you're just nagging me or harping on me, and I'm not just assuming this is a woman here. I guess it could be a man too. But how are we approaching it? Are we actually really resolving it?
And it could also depend on the severity too. I mean, anyway. Whatever the issue is. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I would say guys, we need to resolve it. Okay, so what is it about this thing, whatever it is, what's it doing to you? How's it making you feel? How's it, and let's talk about this. We'll probably try to bring some tools on reflective listening, because even if we don't put anything into your hands, you can Google this. Google has all of it. Right. Reflective listening. So it's a way of going, okay, so what I hear you saying is, or what I understand is, you're saying ... Is that correct? Yes, and ... So it's learning how to really, let me hear you, not just what you're saying, but then also what you're feeling, and it sounds like you're mad about that. It sounds like you're disappointed or you're hurt, that kind of thing.
The other thing I would say is so if there's this thing happening and the spouse is feeling hurt by it, is to be honest about your hurt. What is this doing as opposed to the problem? What is this doing to me as a person? How is this hurting me in the relationship? And being honest, because I mean, at the end of the day, again, this goes back to what we said last week, is she is not my enemy. I want to please her. I want to help her. She's for me and I'm for her. And so what is it doing to your relationship?
And you need to understand also in these situations, if it's a repeat offense over and over and over, guess what's happening to the one who's being offended? They're getting more and more and more resentful. Their heart is getting more and more and more hardened toward you, because you are repeatedly doing the thing that, or not doing the thing that is upsetting your partner. There was a really good explanation or example of this. One of my colleagues had said, and I'll just quickly go through it. A man who's been, owns his own house, been doing the same thing for the past 30 years, going to work, coming home, he undresses at the doorway, kicks his shoes off, and he's trailing clothes along the way, and he gets into the shower and cleans up, and then he comes and sits down on the couch and he unwinds by watching some TV. Fast forward, he gets married. This beautiful woman that he loves, she starts noticing a pattern. She's coming home and there's clothes all the way to the shower, and guess what? Why will you not pick up your clothes and put it in the hamper? I mean, this is how arguments are, guys. I don't understand. You're a grown man. Why can you not put your clothes in the hamper? And she's been noticing this for months, and she's been nagging him for months, and then till finally she's mad. I'm angry now. It's no longer just an irritant. I'm mad. So she decides, this is where I say, I own me and me only. She decides to go in, sit down next to him on the couch. She says, honey, can you pause that for a second? Okay, let's pause the TV. Let's not try to have a conversation in front of the TV. And then he pauses it, and he says, yes, sweetheart, what's up? And so she describes the pattern that she's been seeing. I noticed this. And for the past few months, this has been happening. And I've, asked, and she says, and now what the problem is I'm finding myself resenting you. And she says, and I don't want to resent you. That's not something I want. Can you help me with that? And so now what she's done is she has put it on her, and she's invited him into the conversation. And he says, sure, I can help you with that. And she says, how would you like to help me with that? And then he says, well, I don't guess it's really that big of a deal if I can just put my clothes in the hamper. I'm a grown man, I can do that. And I'll make sure that I do that every day. And she says, you will? And he says, yes, I will. I'll do that. And she says, thank you. Thank you so much.
I think they even moved the hamper to where he could
do that. Move the hamper. Let's be creative here.
Right,
How do we got to do that? And then the funny thing is, then he asked me after that scenario, he says, whose problem is this really? Whose problem is this? And I sat and I thought about it, and I said, well, Because I think the obvious would be it's his problem because he's not picking up the clothes. But I says, no, it's her problem because he's oblivious. I mean, he's just going about doing his thing.
He's been doing this for years.
Doing this for years. She's the one that's mad. So it's her problem to address it. And let's not get into these mind reading things where we go, well, he should just know. He should just understand that. Well, this is where my husband has told me, he says, Sharon, men are not dumb, they're not stupid at all. He goes, but we are very simple. He says, and yes, sometimes we do need to be told, or at least we need to understand what's causing you the issue. Don't make me read your mind.
By the way, another book that we would encourage you to read is When Men Think Like Waffles, Women Think Like Spaghetti. Men think in boxes. We open the box up and we can close the box. We even have nothing boxes. We can think about nothing. Women are like, how in the world is that even possible? Because everything intertwines with everything. That's why it's spaghetti brain, right? Is that, matter of fact, we had this conversation on the way here. She's talking about what we're going to do, and we hadn't finished, I hadn't closed the box that we were talking about 5 minutes ago yet. And I said, what? What are you talking about? And she goes, no, we're at the church box right now. I said, okay, wait a minute, let me shift to that box. So yeah, I am not going to be able to be a mind reader. We are very simple creatures, not that we're dumb, stupid, or anything like that, but we think in boxes and categories. And you guys are intertwined, and she's Susie Q and John Bon Billy over here, and they're all interconnected somehow. Anyway, so.
Yeah, just sitting here thinking about offense and, consistently being offended by different things or the same thing. There's this story, the church at Corinth, that they were, and I love this story because I've used it a lot in the church world because it's not just a story for marriages, but it's for every relationship, but especially in the church. But they were eating, you could buy, talk about meat again, you could buy sacrificed meat that had been sacrificed to idols for a cheaper price because it had been sacrificed to this idol, and then they would take it to the market and sell it for a reduced price. And there were these Christian folks that were buying this meat and eating it because it was cheaper, save $1. And there were other Christians that were getting offended by this. You're eating sacrificed meat that was sacrificed to a false god, a false idol. And Paul addresses it, and he addresses both sides. And I think, to me, that means a lot in my marriage. He looks at the people that are being offended, and he says, don't be so easily offended. They're not worshiping the idol. They're not worshiping the God. They're just trying to feed their families and save $1. And then he looks at the people that are eating the sacrificed meat, and he says, be careful not to offend. You need to be aware of what you're doing and how it's perceived and how it's hurting your brother and your sister. And it may not be worth the $1 you save to cause this. And so I think in our relationships and in our marriage, we have to straddle both sides of that. We have to be careful not to offend. If our wife or our husband has told us, hey, what you're doing bothers me. I'm getting tired of picking up your socks. It's not hard. It's not hard to do that. Maybe we should be more aware of what we're doing. And on the other side, it's just socks. Maybe they've had a rough day or whatever. So be careful not to offend and be not easily offended.
You asked me a question over the phone, and I wanted to address that because we've got a scripture that I want to kind of tie that together. You asked me, why are marriages today so easily dismissed versus our prior, our grandparents or
someone asked that question online. Why are marriages lasting like our grandparents' generations?
Right. And so I'll give you the scripture in a second, but I wanted to kind of address that just for a second, is that, before, our grandparents, and I think he even told you on the phone, I believe it had something to do with loyalty. My dad was a Chevy man until the day he died. He was never going to buy a Ford. He was never going to buy anything else. It was Chevrolet. And it was about, my dad worked at a company for 40 some years, went from a route man all the way to vice president. And probably his father worked at Raytheon, which was like a nuclear plant, for 60 some years. And, it was all about loyalty, and you just figure things out and you work through things. And the scripture in John 6:66, this is the scripture where it's a hard saying. Jesus is saying, if this offends you, where he's talking about, you'll have no part of me if you don't eat of my flesh, drink of my blood, talking about the communion and that kind of stuff. And the moment Jesus says to the disciples, because it says John 6:66, that and some went away and followed him no longer. And Jesus looked at the disciples and says, do you also want to go away? And I don't know if it was Peter or one of the disciples, I can't remember exactly who it was, but said, "The Lord, who shall we go? You have the power of life and death. You are the Messiah." And I think in my mind, as tying it back to our relationships, is that she is all I want outside of my relationship with Christ. She is who I want. This is who I chose to spend my life with. And no matter what happens, I want to be with her. And that loyalty lies in us fixing whatever this is. I had just a great illustration of this. My mentor, great guy, Sam Fisher, pastors in Texas, and he was our youth pastor back in Cleveland, Tennessee. And he said, marriage is where you get inside a room and there are no windows and there are no exits. No doors, no windows, you can't get out. And if you have a problem, you figure it out. Because the connection is where you want to solve the problem and you want to have that relationship with your spouse, as opposed to seeing an exit and I'm just out.
I think too, we are so bombarded, people, let's be honest, with everybody's opinion. Back in the day, Grandpa didn't have social media. They didn't have all these voices. People, and it sounds good, right? Those itching ears. And so if we're not careful, we're listening more to the voice of everybody else instead of the voice of God. And then we say, oh, well, yeah, you're right. Preach it, sister, on TikTok. That's right, And I'm going to leave that sorry person, that kind of a thing. So there's a lot of that, I think, that's going on as well. But if you don't do the work, if you don't stick it out, yes, let me just say this very sensitively, even if there is an affair, okay, you still can have the best marriage you've ever had in your life. It still can be. God still can restore, like we were talking this morning. And if you bail, if both of you are willing to work at it, then you will and can have the best marriage that you've ever had in your life. But if you bail, then you miss out on the glory of God. Because I really believe that what we share, what y'all share as married couples, is a testament to the keeping power of God. And we miss out on the message. My marriage isn't just about me and him. My marriage is about everybody else around me. My marriage is about my children. My marriage is about the friends that I keep. My marriage is about the church. It's about Jesus. It's about communicating a message to the world. And I want the glory of God to shine through and in me. And yes, in my marriage and through my marriage.
Preach it, sister.
That's what I want. That's what I'm fighting for. And I can remember in the car banging my fist on the wheel, talking to God and saying, I don't understand, God. Everywhere around me, these people are divorcing, this is happening, and I'm going through this stuff in my relationship, and I'm just beginning to wonder, is what you say in your word really true? Is it really true? Because the way I see it around me, it's not, from the things that I'm seeing. And then I stopped, and I said, but I need to see that it's true. And I says, and I'm willing to let it begin in me. I said, God, please show me that what you say you can do in your word is real, and let it start with me. And here's the other thing I said, and I'm willing to do whatever I need to do to make sure that happens. Now that's a big mouthful, and trust me, I was challenged on that. But I'm here to tell you that what God says in His Word is true. We have to submit to Him first, and then to one another. And these offenses that we're talking about, they don't take as deep root and they don't become as big of an issue because we're submitting to the process and we're allowing this to be more than just us.
I love that. I love that no matter what the situation is, there's hope. I think, it kind of goes without saying, but obviously if there's abuse in a marriage,
Absolutely.
We're talking about something different.
That's why I
Totally
said
different.
sensitively.
Yeah. But if you've got two willing people that are willing to submit to the Lord and submit to each other and put God first and communicate well, there's hope no matter what.
Absolutely.
Someone asked here, how do you encourage your spouse to go to counseling when they don't think you need it? How do you encourage your spouse to go to counseling when they don't think that you need it?
I would encourage you do it together, if that's what it takes, as opposed to sending them to counseling. Go as a couple, and maybe you're not working specifically on the relationship, but you're there to kind of be a support or there as a encouragement in the midst of that. Like I've had couples come in and their relationship is good, but their spouse is struggling with grief. They lost their dad not too long ago, and the husband was there as a support. And she was just really grieving the loss and wasn't able to move forward. So sometimes it is the support, sometimes it is the encouragement. I'll go with you. You may not get anything out of it, but can we go together?
And I think it's also understanding that he can't really tell me anything to do. It really doesn't work that way. What you need to do is you need to go to counseling. I need to be able to see that for myself. So if I felt like my husband needed to go to counseling and he was going to be, didn't want to do it, then I might approach it by saying, I've noticed this, or I've noticed that, or I'm noticing, and this seems to be, an ongoing problem, or it seems to be difficult for you. I'm just wondering if it might be helpful if you go speak to someone about this. Because I don't know that I can help you fully as your spouse to work through whatever this is. Because if you just tell me, hey, you need to go to counseling, then what you're telling me is you think I'm crazy and da-da-da-da. But if I'm saying that I'm noticing this and it hurts me to see this, or it's hurting us, or however you want to say that, and then you just offer it as, have you thought about that?
Yeah, it really isn't how you say it. Like I had a couple come in one time and he was convinced she was just trying to fix him. Mm-hmm. And as she left the room, I told him, I said, my number one goal is not to fix you. It's just to give you a space just to talk. And so sometimes it's creating that space, like you're telling your spouse, I'm not trying to fix you. I'm not trying to make you into something that you're not. I just want you to go and receive help for whatever is going on that's creating this problem or creating this situation.
Okay, so you've spoken to the spouse in that situation. Now, I want you to speak to me as counselors, as a brother of the Lord. I don't think I need counseling. What would you tell me, brother? My wife's, she wants to go. I don't think I need it. What would you tell me?
So if we were in the room by ourselves, I would tell you, or I would ask you.
We're alone.
We're alone.
We're alone.
Are we alone, or are we with the wife?
Speak bluntly to me.
I would ask you, brother to brother, like, tell me what you think the problem is. Tell me what you think the issue is. And
She just makes a big deal out of
and she makes it. That's what I was going to ask you. Is it
makes a big deal out of everything.
and I would be asking you, what is your perspective? Like, do you find the disconnect between you and her?
I just can't make her happy.
What do you think would make her happy?
I need a good answer.
If we're role playing here,
I don't know. I don't know.
you ever ask her?
We just argue. Anytime we start talking, we just argue.
So then that's where I might say, well, it sounds like this issue is something bigger than what you seem to have the means or the tools to understand. You know, it might be helpful to get someone else involved in this situation to kind of help you weed through what seems to be hopeless. Someone else might have some other insight into that. Would you be open to that? And then you might go, what, a counselor or something? Yeah, there's Christian counselors out there, by the way. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is, no matter who you are, whether you think you need it or not, first of all, let's understand that we all can be wrong.
Yes.
Amen?
Amen.
Amen.
Everybody can be wrong.
Amen.
Everybody can think they don't need something and might be wrong. And you guys, as we walk in that room, we're not saying who's wrong or right. We're just creating a space, like you said, for us to talk, for us to communicate well, right?
That is one of the biggest fears, I think, for people coming to therapy is they think we're going to judge them. We're going to call them out and say they're wrong, which we might do that, but it's always done in a gentle way. It's always done in a loving way. And we're not the authority on you. You're the authority on you. We're just there to listen, and we're there to offer a different perspective. So it's kind of, I see counseling like we're in this dark room, marriage, struggles, whatever. And so me as a therapist, it is my job to walk into that dark room with you, sit down with you, and say, okay, together, let's find the light. Let's find where the switch is. Let's figure this out together. No judgment. And the reason why I can do that with no judgment is because I know my stuff. And he knows his stuff. We know our stuff. We've got a messy story, guys. And there isn't anything that we don't get or understand here. And it's a matter of pride sometimes. We have to crucify pride and say, hello, I'm human, and I might need someone to kind of help me through this.
I'm going to put you on the spot. He's texting me. I want to hear what he's got to say.
The question about the way I heard you read the question about what do I do with my spouse while we see a counselor. I heard the question read more as not as an individual, but what if I want my spouse to go to marriage counseling with me, but they won't go as a couple. Like, we need help together, but they're saying, no, we don't. We're good. Our marriage is good. How do we address, or how would the person asked that, how would they address that?
Wow, that's, we see this all the time, by the way. You know, and again, it's understanding, this goes back to some principles that we just don't like to accept. And the reality is that I cannot make my spouse see things the way I need them to see it. I can't control them. All I can do is do the best I can to love them where they're at. And so maybe that individual goes into counseling themselves, and they sit down with the counselor and they say, here's the deal. Is there anything I can do? And so we work together with that spouse to start planting some seeds. Before Tracy and I ever went into therapy, I was the one who didn't want to go in. He was in. And him and his therapist would come up with some things to plant some seeds in me and water those seeds. Until finally I said, okay, I'll go in. I'll go in with you. there's so many things that come to my mind in that situation because I've seen so many couples. Sometimes, again, I think the fear is a big issue, or sometimes they can be a narcissist. And I don't have a problem. You're the problem. And honestly, guys, I see that so much. But their spouse, they don't have a problem. The other one's the crazy one. And so then I have to work with that spouse on, okay, what are we going to do about that? What does God have to say about that? You know, sometimes there are spouses who just shut the wall and they just won't. And that's where I go, you and God have got to get together and y'all have got to work this out. You, go ahead.
Yes, so sometimes so there are obviously extreme situations where the spouse just outright refuses. But sometimes I try to go into the back door, like to encourage. So I always give homework, you know, in my sessions, a couple sessions and stuff like that. So like I'll send a love language quiz, like especially in a situation like where the spouse doesn't come in, I'll send a love language quiz for the person that's in the room. And then, would you mind giving this to your spouse and see if they would want to do that? If they don't want to do that, maybe, you know, after you do your love language, can you guess what your spouse's love language is? What do you think? Do they want praise? Do they want affirmation, quality time, those kind of things? And begin to start doing that. Because what you want to do, because there's a thing called the love bank, and I know we don't have a lot of time, but just to kind of tie the love language and love bank together, is that think about your physical bank, like your financial institution. If you've got $100,000 in the bank, $1 is not that big a deal. But if you have nothing in the bank, $1 is a big deal, right? So in your relationship, there may be you've poured a lot into your spouse and they feel very, you know, great in your relationship. But it sounds like if they're not wanting to come to counseling, maybe there's nothing in the bank. Maybe they're emotionally bankrupt. That's what they call it. And so if you can start pouring into the love bank of your spouse, that lifts up the money situation, the emotional, the equity in their heart. And so they start to feel like I'm more connected to you. So therefore, and I call that the back door. I call that you're not, you know, hey, let's go to counseling. You're starting to feed them emotionally, and so they start to feel connected. So therefore, yeah, I'd go with you, you know, and it starts to feel like instead of you're trying to fix them, of like, hey, I just want this to be better.
And that's what will tell you what you're dealing with at that point, whether or not they're molding, shaping, to want to do that.
Yeah, because there may be anger, there may be resentment, which is creating that resistance.
Yeah.
So if you can start feeding.
So they're here, you're here, you're ready to go to counseling, they're not. They don't think, maybe it's beyond hope or whatever. So what I'm hearing is this person that is ready and this person that's not ready, there's some work to do. Mm-hmm. And it's not just, oh, well, you've made up your mind and that's it.
Right.
Maybe there's some work to do. Maybe pouring into that, what you call it, the bank.
Love bank.
Pouring into that is the
An
next
example
steps.
of that is the movie Fireproof. I don't know if y'all have seen that movie, but that's kind of an example of it, where, you know, of course she was shut down for a reason, but, you know, he just started pouring in selflessly into that, and it began to change some things.
Yeah, 40 days. I don't know what the book was called, but he was doing 40 days to win your spouse back or something like that. He would make her a cup of coffee. He would, you know, do all kinds of things that was pouring into her, to her love bank.
Yeah. Wow, so good. So good. Do y'all have anything else you want to throw in?